Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 228 of the UFO Buster Radio News Report. And today we have a return guest. You know him as Sawyer, former member of Heaven's Gate. And he was on here, I think it was like last month, and we talked about Heaven's Gate. But today, Sawyer's going to join us. And he's going to talk about current news because ufology apparently is experiencing an uptick in news. People of all walks of life are interested in this topic. And apparently Sawyer's been keeping an eye on it. And he said, hey, when I get on there, let me talk to you about what's going on with ufology, all these things that are going on in UFOs and all this interest. Sawyer, buddy, welcome back to UFO Buster Radio.
Glad to be here, Manny.
Listen, it was a great time last time, and a lot of people gave some feedback. They had they really enjoyed the interview, and like last time, we had technical issues just now. We're about 5 minutes late because Skype just doesn't want to cooperate with us.
Yeah, I'm not much of a technician. I'm not bad at it, but I need work. Maybe it's the Skype
you and
software,
I both, Sawyer. Let me tell you, this is the kind of times when I decide to go explicit just because of technology.
Yes, I hear you.
So, Sawyer, first thing I want to touch upon is that when we were setting up this interview, you said that you were in contact with people who still have interest in the teachings of Tien Do. And I said, you know what? That's a good way to kind of start this interview because the way we left it off, it was, Heaven's Gate is done. Everything happened. And, it left that kind of open discussion as to whether or not their teachings is still sought after or people are still interested in it that were not members way back when. So, you said you have people, even from people across the pond on the other side of the world who are interested in Tien Do. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, I do, because I've been live streaming on my YouTube channel. YouTube channel name is 3 as numeral 3 SPM, which stands for Third Stone People's Movement, actually. But it was like a band name that I started a long time ago, and I was the only member of it. But anyway, so I started doing live streams like 2 a.m. in the morning Eastern Standard Time. And I kept on seeing a number of individuals from Spain and England and France and Australia logging in, to the chat room for the live stream, and that was exciting because it's just nice to get another more international exposure, and so there's a number of people that my subscriptions started going up with the increased media that was being done, so I started playing actually tapes of Do talking and Tien Do talking, both different tapes that they left behind because they left a lot of information behind. And it's not designed to form a new cult. There's no new group, even though some individuals want that. That's not where we're at right now. And I've refused to be a leader of such a group because I'm not the teacher. I'm a student like everybody else. I just had the experience of being with the teachers, so I can relay a lot of things that the teachers were teaching, and so that individuals can choose for themselves whether they want to form a relationship with those teachers, even though they're not here physically anymore.
So really, after all the time that you spent with them, don't you feel that maybe you have a good understanding of what Tien Do were teaching? Don't you feel that maybe it's become a part of you in a way?
Well, yes, everything they were teaching never left me, actually, in terms of belief. the problems that I had was that I wasn't learning certain things that were requirements to learn while I was with the group. And so I was put to the test in different ways that are not actually obvious and at the time. And but looking back on it, I can see how I was like cheating in some ways, like not following the guidelines and procedures that T&O were giving us, even though I didn't really think that I was doing that. It wasn't nothing, major, but I was slowly losing. I was falling behind in terms of being a student, and I didn't realize it. And so then I was put to the test in 1994, and I flunked that test. And then I was, given a number of opportunities to recover, and I didn't choose to take them. And it's a long story, and I've talked about it many times. I'm not against talking about it. But the bottom line was that T&O throughout the whole classroom weren't really looking for students. They weren't looking for the numbers of students. They weren't looking for having thousands of people believe in them. So they were weeding people out in a sense, or filtering people out. It really wasn't weeding necessarily, but and I was one of those that was weeded out. But it didn't stop me from believing in them because I chose to leave on my own volition, and so. I'm sorry. I'm going into areas that I know take a lot of explanation and leave a lot of loose ends, and
right.
but it's hard for me to.
So I totally understand. When you're speaking about this, it reminds me of like the kung fu movies of back in the day, right? So you have the student and the teacher, the master, who's basically teaching all his knowledge to the student, and then one day, as you've heard, you hear this phrase back in the day, people who watch kung fu movies, people who are teaching other people, one day the student does become the master. And it sounds like people are reaching out to you because they know you had that insight. You had that firsthand experience with T&O, and it sounds like they're looking for you to be their teacher.
Well, yes, I understand that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with people wanting to reach out to me. But from my perspective, the best I can do is show them the real teacher, what they're teaching, because I don't have anything new to say. And if I did have something new to say, then I wouldn't be the student of T&O. Because they provided all the information that anybody needs. They don't really need me, but I'm actually the opportunity. I've been given the opportunity to talk to people, and it's actually for my benefit. But the next level takes advantage of that. T&O and the crew on their spacecrafts, they take advantage of my desire to be of service again, and so they can help individuals come to the information through various ways that I have my social media accounts on Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat I'm not doing anything with really, but and YouTube mostly, and people are, the more and more time passes, and the more and more people see more of the truth of what happened in that group, the more they're not so afraid of paying attention to what they were teaching. Because there's nobody that's going to be committing suicide anymore. That would be a negative at this point. Because we need our bodies, our physical bodies, in order to learn lessons through. Like everybody in the human kingdom has lessons hard times, or they lose their job, their spouse breaks up with them, they have a death in the family, and those are all lesson opportunities. Or they get hooked on different substances, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, and becomes very difficult for them to break away from those addictions, but they can do it, and they can get help for doing that, and they can actually grow and then be recognized by T and Do and their crew as people that are trying to grow. And so it's not my broadcasts that are really doing anything, except on the surface. If it wasn't me, it would be somebody else. In other words, if I had, like with the kung fu example that you gave, it came a time where the student had to perform. And so he was put up against another in a competition, and he could have passed or failed, but he could always do better. So if I had passed my lessons, then there would have been somebody else talking to you on the phone, perhaps, or to somebody else about this, because I'm talking about what the religions call the kingdom of God, and they've created the planet and all the life forms on it. So they can do amazing things. Of course, this whole planet is amazing. So I guess that probably went too far in trying to answer your question.
It's actually perfect, Sawyer, because the truth is that whenever you watch those kung fu films, the student was always flawed in one way or another. They didn't meet the expectations of the master, or the master was always complaining that they were not meeting the rigors of what it meant to be a kung fu master. And really, I'll be honest, I applaud you for making that statement that people have to go through things in life. They need to experience hardships. They need to experience just being human in order to grow. And I like that. I appreciate that. And I wasn't expecting that from you. And I appreciate that. And again, that's why I see that a lot of these people are reaching out to you, because they feel that though you're not T and Do, they see you as a voice of T and Do, and that's why they're reaching out to you. So, in the meantime, do you have any plans of maybe I don't know, I could say holding court with these guys, or maybe expanding on what T and Do presented, or translating for them?
No, I have absolutely no plans at all for anything, actually. In fact, my plans actually fall apart whenever I try to put something into motion. But when things happen in the world and people call me, like you got in touch with me, and so I'm basically putting my name out there and, my face, and saying, okay, if you want to know about T and Do, I'm going to try to provide you with everything I know. And that's when things happen. And I just finished interviewing with. People Magazine just put out a video, part of their investigation, discovery, investigating cults. And on June 17th at 9 p.m. it went live, and I interviewed with them in New York City several months ago. And I actually haven't watched that yet. But there's another group that is a major national media group affiliated with NBC Universal, and they just I just went down to New York again and interviewed with them, and they took a lot of B-roll footage and all kinds of. I guess they're going to use quite a bit of what I've given them. So, that's all exciting, because that's bringing the subject, each time I do this, usually I get to say a few things more about T&O instead of just the same old stuff over and over again that, has been dominating the media. And even if they refer to the story as like a potential crime, at least I get to express why it was not a crime. And that's very hard to understand for a lot of people. And there's always going to be people that are, refusing to see it that way. That's we all have the choice in how we see everything, and so so there's other media events that are in the works, and so I just go with what comes my way as long as I keep on putting my shingle out there.
It makes total sense. In a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of times you just have to, you kind of have to defend what you believe in. And it sounds like that's what you're doing, and that's why you're making these appearances. But one of the fascinating things that I found was that my intent for this interview was to find out, what does Sawyer think about when it comes to what's happening with UFOs recently? I don't know, when we talked the first time, we talked about how the fact that Heaven's Gate was not a quote-unquote UFO cult. And I said, it'd be fascinating to see if Sawyer actually keeps up with ufology and the things that are happening. And it turns out that you actually do.
Yes, I try to keep up with everything in the news because there's so many examples that can be used of the signs of the times, so to speak. And in terms of the UFO subject, of course, T&O had quite a bit to say about it, and right from the beginning. And we're even in touch with Walt Andrews and Whitley Strieber and other different ufologists, and like Bill Lear, and those are the first names that come to my mind. But none of them wanted to have anything to do with what Doe was talking about at the time. So anyway, I follow everything, and I noticed when, of course, the Fox News came out with the broadcast about the Navy pilots that saw those objects, and that was played on the news, and then some time went by, and it's played again on the news, and it keeps on coming up. And I would wonder, why are they bringing this up over and over again? Because the policy for the government was to basically not say anything about it, be all hush hush about it, and make everything into a conspiracy theory, but now it seems like they want to promote at least a basic understanding that we might be being visited by extraterrestrials or space aliens, if you want to put it that way. It's actually two ways of talking about these individuals. That anyway, let me get back to the. So I think that the government doesn't do things because they want to inform people. They want people to be more knowledgeable. I don't believe. Unless it's something that's part of their agenda. And so they have an agenda with the UFO subject, and I believe it's tied into the way that President Trump wanted to stimulate a space force. And yet Congress wasn't going to fund it. And so I suspect that part of the bringing it to the public is the way of building up interest, and claiming that the aliens are actually coming to attack us, and so therefore they need to defend against them. And also, the Space Force is also going to be designed to fight against China and Russia and anybody else that tries to shoot down satellites or whatever. But it's also related to, it seems to be related to the near-missed asteroids that have been coming every year, like one or two, asteroids since like 2013. I've been tracking them. Have been coming closer and closer to the Earth, and even that the Kablinsk meteor in Russia that happened, I believe it was 2013 or 20. Maybe it was before that. I don't remember my dates sometimes, but that was like an explosion, almost like a nuclear explosion above the Earth. And so when these near-miss asteroids come over and they go between the orbit of the Moon and the Earth, that's like really getting close. And they seem to be getting closer, and then they back off, and then they get closer again, and they back off, and each year goes by. And so I'm pretty sure. I mean, I can't speak 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that the powers that be are taking notice of this, and there are plans to try to divert asteroids, or blow them up, or or land on them with some kind of device that can send them in a different direction, or and they've done some testing with that. I believe, like the Temple 1, when they shot the asteroid, or actually that was a comet, actually Temple 1, and the United States government shot it, and I remember watching it live on the internet when they did, and it didn't seem to disturb it at all. But I think, and the Rosetta mission was from the English, from the ESA, the European Space Agency.
Mm-hmm.
They landed on an asteroid. And the Japanese just landed on an asteroid with different kinds of remote control devices. And I don't think these are accidental. I think there's more than one reason for doing this. I believe they're also looking for an element that can give them the high speeds that they witnessed with the UFOs and the ability to defy gravity. And President Bush, in his last State of the Union address, said that they were planning to go to the Moon and Mars with a colony, and they're still pursuing that. And he said at the end of his address that perhaps we will find an element, a resource, is what his words were. Perhaps we will find a resource while we're doing the colonizing of the Moon and Mars that will boggle the mind, is what his words were. And I think that was referring to what Bob Lazar was talking about, the element that was backwards engineered that he found in one of those engines that were taken out of one of those spacecrafts that were either given to them by the space aliens or that they got from a crashed one.
It's fascinating you said Bob Lazar, because he's, as of recently, he's kind of struck a nerve with me. Because initially, I didn't believe his story at all, but lately, it seems like his story is taking a different phase for me. It's turning more to the believable. But I got a question for you, because you said none of this is accidental. And do you believe, and this is what I believe, and I'm going to just put it out there, that I believe that, if there is a certain threat, or if that someone, let's say for a lack of a better term, a more advanced civilization is threatening you to basically come out in the open and say, here we are, do you believe that the reason why there is all this talk publicly and acknowledgments by the government in many ways, not directly, that there is unidentified flying objects or UAPs, because they know that eventually they're not going to be able to keep the lid on this?
Well, yeah, that's a good point, actually, and but it goes into another way of looking at the whole subject, and see, my contention is that the planet and all of us, all the life forms on the planet, in the animals, the plant kingdom, the mineral kingdom, everything, was designed by scientifically advanced civilization, okay? But a civilization that's not restricted to any one planet. They live wherever they are working in their laboratories. And the laboratories can be as big as a planet, like Pluto, for instance, might be an example of that. I don't know for sure. But Tiendo mentioned Pluto in a movie script that they wrote that they said was fiction based on the truth. Anyway, so if the Earth was designed for a purpose, which I contend that it was, then if that purpose was to provide an opportunities many times for individuals to grow to be like in an astronaut training program, to become a member of their crew, then but they wanted them to grow by using their free will, all of us, and the way that they are providing the free will is by providing individuals that failed an astronaut training program in the past and did not choose to recover from that, and ended up going against these beings that are above human. They're evolutionarily above human in all ways. And so since they went against those individuals, the next level said, well, I guess maybe we're going to have to raise the bar on getting into the next level, into the crews of the next level. And so we're going to put a bunch of other individuals that are actually souls we're talking about now, that are actually also technical structures that are like a plasma consistency in terms of their physicality. Anyway, but so we're going to put a number of individuals that are basically in the same school or grade in school as these individuals that dropped out and went against their teachers, and so that they won't go through the same working for the next level a little bit, and then going against them and doing things that were not in the program to do, like mating with humans. And so the space aliens are the ones that were actually, according to Tiendo, the same individuals that were talked about by Enoch as the Watchers, and they were the fallen angels. They were the Luciferians. Okay, and so they were banned to the Earth, so that they're no longer space aliens anymore. That's why there's people saying now that space aliens are coming from Earth, and that's true, I believe, because they were forced to go underground in order to survive. Different recycling that took place in the previous civilization before we even have records, and we know from the science that there's been a lot of evidence of humans existing on the planet well beyond 6,000 years, in the hundreds of thousands of years. So previous civilizations really isn't a myth anymore. So part of the program, to get to the point that I was trying to get to, is to keep things a mystery for a certain amount of time, so that individuals, by their own thirst to want to know the truth, would end up growing to be able to accept the entire truth and choose who they want to give their allegiance to. And so the next level above human has an interest in keeping things a mystery for a period of time, but then towards the end of the cycle of that astronaut training program, they want all things to be exposed. so that humans can actually look and see what the governments are doing, what the churches are doing, what the religions are doing, and all the hypocrisy that goes on, and recognize that that's not the truth. That's not what's most real about our existence. And by doing that, people start to search, and they tune into your show and other people's shows, and to find out what is true. And of course, it's a big mixture of truth and lies, because the lower forces are working through humans, trying to get them to cover up the truth and shift it into talking about the Earth as being flat, and NASA doesn't exist, and Jesus never existed. All these denials of the records and the history and everything that science has taught us all. So that's all providing the free will, and so that if somebody's not interested in this at all, they're perfectly, it's fine for them to not even pursue it at all, and they might have another opportunity in the future to advance into their next grade in school. And so the individuals that are wanting the truth the most are going to have a hard time with it. It's not going to be easy. It's like that that kung fu training program. It's difficult, and it's meant to be difficult because the next level above human does not need us to join them. They don't need humans for anything. They don't die anymore, so they're not like perennials like humans are. They're not seed bearing. They don't have eggs, and sperm in order to make little babies. They don't do any of that. They grow their physical bodies on a vine like a plant, and they can grow all different shapes and sizes. They can even grow a body that's a spacecraft, and that a soul then that went through the graduation of the astronaut training program and became a member of the next level can then occupy that kind of a vehicle, a physical body that's a spacecraft, and can do a lot of different things. Transport other people, the different places, take soil samples, whatever they do. Thousands of jobs that individuals are doing. But they stay hidden. But they want people to know that the space aliens are real, and learn to separate from how they are not like the members of the next level. Because the space aliens, what they're interested in, from all the evidence that we've seen over the many years, they're interested in human eggs and sperm and DNA and perhaps blood, and also looking for representatives to be like the diplomats, like the people that are starting these groups, like the Etherians and the Pleiadians, and all these different space races are wanting humans, because they also want humans to build them spacecrafts that they can use to try to get off the planet before they are forced to go underground again, like happened, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6,000 years ago.
So, sorry, let me ask you about, you mentioned Bob Lazar. So, I imagine that you know Bob Lazar's story. What do you think about that story? And basically, how does that fit into the narrative of Tian-Do? Okay,
I was actually in the Tian-Do's group during the time that Bob Lazar went public, and was on Art Bell, and we were listening to Art Bell at times at that point. And Doe didn't say anything about whether the story that Bob Lazar was telling was true or not, but he didn't say that it wasn't. And so I have every reason to believe that he's not really making anything up. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that he wasn't fed misinformation. He might have been fed misinformation at times, and because that's what the powers that be like to do. They like to keep control over people and the information, and so they don't want so they want to be able to deny that Bob Lazar even existed, right? And the way he was blacklisted, and from having the university degree that he said he had at MIT, and but his story about being able to bend time and space as a way of describing how somebody from another planet that's many, many, many light years away, how they could possibly live long enough, to get to Earth. Because that was a big question that a lot of scientists had for a long time. A lot of people had. How could that happen? And then Bob Lazar brought up that option of bending time and space in a way that he described in his video the bending of the grid pattern of space, and that was I don't know if there was much talk about wormholes, and at that point in the public eye I don't think there was much talk about it, but maybe in the private scientific organizations there was maybe a lot of talk about it. Because humans have been watching different things in space for a long time, of course, and have noticed that there were certain planets that moved in certain ways that couldn't be justified unless there was another body somewhere, or a black hole or something. So anyway, but Tiendo did say in 1975 that Next Level had highways in outer space. And they also said that there were certain points on the planet that were entry points, and that humans just shooting rockets up into any old, going through the atmosphere in any old direction was interfering with the Next Level, although they can manage it. Because the Next Level potentially has a spacecraft that's as big as half the United States. I'm using that as an example because of the way that was talked about in prophecy as the New Jerusalem. And but Tiendo talked about how there could be a next level spacecraft right on top of the house that we lived in. There could be members of that members in the crew of that spacecraft among us, having physical bodies, but bodies that they stay out of our way, so that even if we were able to touch them, we would feel something. I don't know exactly what we would feel. Didn't talk about that detail, but they said that a spacecraft could be right on top of any place on Earth, and that they would have ways to have gates so that the airliners can go through and the space shuttle and all that. Without interfering with the other parts of that spacecraft that's invisible, but can be completely physical as well. But it doesn't have to be necessarily physical in all the ways that we think about it as, hard matter like rocks and metal. So there's different kinds of physicality, and that's why I think the plasma example is part of that. I know this is kind of like, it's science fiction, but the point to the science fiction was to help upgrade the civilization to more of the truth. And so the Next Level was stimulating, even in the mid-1800s, with writers, and even in Europe and all over the world, potentially. But in the United States, it really took off in the mid-1800s with the UFO maps that happened in the early 1800s, and then the mid-1800s, and then the end of the 1800s, and then, of course, the middle of the 1900s with the Roswell and Aztec and Laredo and Paradise Valley, Arizona, and all those crashes. The Tiendo taught were actually some of those first crashes were next level students coming back and depositing the physical bodies that they had provided for them by the next level, allowing them to die, those physical bodies, but then their soul bodies, which are also a type of physical, were released then to participate in the opportunity of forming a classroom that could graduate the human condition, the human evolutionary condition. And that's what I believe happened when the 38 individuals and Doe laid down their lives. They were finished with their task. And so they went back onto the spacecraft, but they didn't take the bodies with them.
So here's a question for you.
They don't really need human bodies.
Here's a question for you, Sawyer, because there's been a lot of things happening probably in the last 2 years regarding UFOs and general, what appears to be acknowledgement, though the government doesn't come out and say it acknowledges it, but we have video, we have all these things, we have testimonials and things like that. So let me run across a few things that have happened recently, and you let me know, what does it mean to you from your perspective? Number one, we have Richard Dolan recently came out with a memo from an admiral that said, hey, we've had for many years, we've had individuals in the private sector looking at crashed UFOs, and very little progress has been made, and we're keeping this away from government officials. With that's one. The other is, as you alluded to, was the things when it comes to the Nimitz video, the Tic Tac UFO. And also we have the gimbal video that happened in the East Coast. And you also have things on the East Coast being reported about, almost collisions, head-on collisions with jet fighters and UFOs that they cannot identify. And you have so many things that are coming out. Now all of a sudden we have a Bob Lazar who comes out. He speaks to a lot of things that he experienced. But in all of that, it seems that a lot of the things that he talked about that happened way back when seems to connect to things like the Nimitz video, Tic Tac, the Gimbo. All those things seem to all congeal together in a perfect storm where you almost need to have an investigation or disclosure. We know that Harry Reid is really interested in having this kind of disclosure or investigation into UFOs. But from your perspective, all these things coming out, and you also have, and you mentioned in your email, all the things with the Mars Curiosity rover, all the things that we're seeing in pictures and things like that. Do any of those speak to what T and Doe were talking about? Or is this really a time where, we actually have government officials with their back against the wall, and we're telling them there's too much evidence. You need to come out and say something. What are your thoughts?
I'm not familiar with the gimbal video, so I'll have to go, brush up on that one. But everything else that you mentioned, I was aware of, and Harry Reid and all that. And like I said before, it's like, well, let me just address one point regarding the Mars rover.
Okay.
That event, because that leads into other things, because I'm not, that I can't really talk intelligently about I mean, I have my opinion about, what the Tic Tac UFO was and Bob Lazar and but I don't know that that's accurate, So, for all I know, the Tic Tac UFO could have been a CGI thing, I don't think it was. I think it was actually footage, because they've had a lot of footage over the years that, airline pilots in the military have. We have Stephen Greer's, UFO disclosure project, where he had those 40 or so ex-military that all flight controllers and things that all testified to very unusual events. So they've got a ton of footage that they can, kind of release to the public and have a debate about each one of them. And some people are going to think that they're they're space aliens. Some people are going to think that they're government, made, or Chinese or Russian or or Israeli or what it is. And some people are going to think that they're demons. In a sense, that's true though, and or spirits or another dimension. It's not really real. It's not really physical, and so you have all these options on how to think about everything, but I think the only reason the government wants to get involved with it at all is because of how they can use it to forward their own agenda, whether that's to support building underground cities, to go run and hide in, if for instance, there is a nuclear war, or if an asteroid explodes over the Earth, and is the same thing as a nuclear explosion, really, over a big city or something. And I don't think like Harry Reid, has this personal desire to expose the UFO cover-up. I think they like keeping it under wraps for the most part. But like in terms of the Mars rover, that where I don't know if individuals listening to this know about it, there was an object, a bright, flashing, brilliantly white-like object that showed up for like 2 or 3 seconds that the Mars rover took pictures of. And it was right on the horizon. And the object, when you blow it up, is a very unusual shape. And some people compare it to the U.S. The Enterprise, the Star Trek spacecraft in kind of its shape. Now, it's interesting. When I saw that, I didn't know what it was. Of course, I don't have that kind of information. But it was very curious that the SOHO space telescope took many pictures through Scott Waring's work. And Scott has passed away now, but his work still is being forwarded, I think, by some of his supporters, or maybe family members, I don't know exactly. But it showed like the same kind of image in a number of different formats, different time periods, in the corona of the sun. Because people know it, that the SOHO satellite has a number of different cameras on it, and they're trained on the sun 24/7. And people can actually watch, anybody can actually get permission, I think, to log in to watch the sun. But a lot of times when something would happen on the sun that was very unusual, they would cut the stream off. But so many people ended up watching those broadcasts of the sun from the SOHO satellite, that they were recording everything, and so they would then go back and look at it and try to dissect it. And so that same object appears to be something that was seen in the sun's corona, because where you're not supposed to be able to for anything to exist, really, because it's so hot. Okay, now I remember back in when I first started to go public with on my YouTube channel with Tiendo's Information, and there was a satellite. I don't know if it was SOHO or not. I don't remember exactly, but my video is still on my YouTube channel. Well, my first 2 or 3 videos that I made, and it shows a solar flare, the energy from a solar flare going towards the planet Mercury. And when it got close to Mercury, a spacecraft just appeared that looked almost exactly like that spacecraft that was shown on Mars. And so this wasn't in the sun's corona, I don't think. But that was video footage, and I still have that. I think I still have that video footage. Although my computer might have crashed that I had that on it, but it's still in a video if people want to see it. But I don't think it's accidental. And here's where I'm going to go a little bit off the topic in a sense, that I think after a certain amount of time, the next level above human weren't showing anything to humans, weren't trying to show any, the space aliens to them, or because the next level can do that. They can, force, they can allow people to see things that otherwise they wouldn't see, just the same way that humans can use infrared light to see things that they didn't think were there. And anyway, but so I think it was part of the design that this information comes more public now, for the sake of the individuals that can still become students of the next level program, for future opportunity to actually be a graduate into the next level. And so the signs that they're giving us now are the ones that are in the moon, Mars, the sun, the planets, among the stars. Okay, and that's what was taught by the individual that was named Jesus, who was not a religious person. He was not a spiritual person. He was a space traveler from, I believe, the next level. I think he was the same individual that was Doe. He was the same individual that was Adam, Enoch, Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, and then Doe for the sixth coming, the sixth closeness to the planet for this current experiment. And so all these things that are happening now, I don't think are necessarily space aliens either. Even though they might be referring to the crashed UFOs, that the space aliens also, according to Doe, simulated some of their own crashes because they're always trying to make themselves look like they're the next level. So if the next level crashes a spacecraft in order for their students to come here and to leave evidence of people that came from outer space, then they're going to want to do the same thing so that humans will not know the difference between the creators, the level above human, and space aliens.
So do you think possible that this is all a form of deception by possibly alien entities? Well,
yes. I think the aliens do want to deceive us. But there are a lot of humans that are actually working on their behalf, not necessarily consciously. Because these alien entities are also able to circulate in the human environment in an unseen way, like through the spirit world. But they're not really spirits, the same as like any one of us humans that die. Our spirit still exists, but it's not the same substance as a soul that was a space alien that we're talking about as a space alien, a fallen angel. They have more ability to influence people and travel in the different areas of what we call the spirit world. The atmosphere of the earth is potentially part of it. It is the spirit world where they circulate, and so they can go to individuals and they can suggest, start a space force, because what do they want? They want humans to develop spacecrafts that can take them off the planet, and they want to be able to stimulate a life support system as well, and because they also have physical bodies that die, but they need to grow those physical bodies over and over again because they don't last that long. 50 or 100 years or is nothing to individuals that know that there can be bodies developed that can last for thousands of years.
Well,
but they don't know how to do
Sawyer,
that.
You just introduced a completely different aspect of disinformation that I've never even considered, that possibly what's happening is coming from outside of our own planet. That maybe alien entities are the ones who are creating the deception and disinformation. I never even thought about that.
Well, yes, but they're not coming from outside the planet. That's except to the degree of the near space around the planet. They don't have the option, according to Tiandoa, to travel like even I don't know how far they can go. Okay, maybe they can get to the moon. I don't know exactly. With their spacecraft, but they're very limited. They were actually drawn to the Earth by the next level to go through this program of overcoming the human condition or doing their own thing. And they're allowed to do their own thing for a certain period of time, and then the next level is going to just recycle them into another form of energy. But for the meantime, they're going to promote themselves as gods, and they're going to influence the humans on the planet. And but it's all going to be mammalian. It's all going to be based on, like for instance, like a lot of the space aliens in the early 50s were talking about how they were against the nuclear bomb program, and that it came from a planet that was destroyed by war and environmental decay, and so they want humans to take care of their environment. Well, yes, of course, the space aliens want humans to take care of their environment because they need human DNA. They're not in it for the goodness of it. And people having choices. They're in it for themselves. They're totally self-centered.
Oh, I see. So when we have these individuals who say that they were in contact with ET, and ET says, we're here to save your planet, it's really more about saving the planet for themselves.
Yes, I believe that's a more accurate way of looking at it.
That is amazing. I learn something new every time, Sawyer.
Yeah, so do I. It's like that's a never-ending process. The whole time I was with T and O's classroom, I thought I was keeping up with everything. But when I left them, and then years later, when I started to listen to the tapes and things, I recognized that I didn't really absorb half of what they were talking about because there was so much depth what they were talking about, and they would just use a few words. They didn't talk philosophy. They wanted us to take control over these physical bodies, which they consider these physical bodies to be like horses. That we were rounded up from the wild, like all of us humans are wild, in a sense, not to degrees, of course. And what they wanted, in order to build strength of mind, to be able to be on a crew in a next level environment and be working on things that are amazing. They don't want just anybody to be among them, because they, if they just allowed a human to come on their spacecraft, the human would end up saying, how come you're not doing it that way? You could do it better this way or that way, when they don't even have a clue what they're talking about.
Exactly, and that kind of brings me back to my whole analogy of the Kung Fu master and the student, and yeah, I totally get it. So, Sawyer, we are at the last 5 minutes of the podcast, and as always, you've brought new insight into the ufology situation. But before we leave, I want to make sure that people get to know where they can reach you, your YouTube channel, if you have any kind of a blog that you have going on, where they can contact you if they have any questions about your perspective tonight.
Sure. My email address that I use for the most part is the same one that I gave you. That's Sawyer HG, which stands for Heaven's Gate, at yahoo.com. Sawyer HG at Yahoo. And my YouTube channel is 3SPM, as in Stone People's Movement, and with the numeral 3. And I've got a Facebook page that I do most of my talking about T&O on, which is called Sawyer Heaven's Gate. And I have a blog that I've been maintaining for a long time, and I'm posting transcripts of T&O's meetings there and a lot of things. And that's sawyerhg.wordpress.com.
So last thing, any big things on the horizon for you?
Well, I don't know what's on the horizon for me, except for all these different people that are coming out of the woodwork wanting to do stories on Heaven's Gate that, are tired of the same old stories. So they're wanting to know more and more of what I can bring to the table. What actually took place.
We have a lot of interest in what's happening beyond the skies that we see. And, Heaven's Gate falls into that situation.
Yes, exactly. And there's so much that can be said about these two individuals from Texas. They had the physical bodies of Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Lou Nettles. And, even going back, I don't know if you got another minute or not.
Oh, absolutely.
But it was
I just wanted to say, UFO Buster Radio is also from Texas, just to let you guys know.
Yeah, I know that. Anything from Texas to me is intriguing because my teachers came from there. So it's not an accident that there's a lot of interest in Texas.
So what was it you wanted to add before we end the show?
Well, speaking of Texas, actually, I don't know if you know the story of the laying down of the lives that the 38 and Doe did in 1997, but they had in their pockets a $5 bill and 75 cents in change, and people wondered what that was, and there was some talk that it was in order for them to not be vagrants, because they were communal living, so they would, turn in their paychecks to the purser, and to pay for all the bills every time they got a paycheck. But whenever they went out to do a job, like even if it was getting the brakes fixed on a car, they would sign out this $5.75 to take with them. And it was also in case they had to do something that extended their stay and they needed to get a bite to eat or something. So anyway, so it ends up that in a story that Samuel Clemens wrote, which is Mark Twain, which was called Captain Stormfield's Trip to Heaven, which he wrote this in around 1912 or something like that. And Thomas Alva Edison actually did the first photography for it, movie projection of the story. In that story, it was about his captain's. He was the captain, and Stormfield was where he lived in Connecticut. And he said that in order to that it was Captain Stormfield's trip to heaven, and heaven was depicted as being in outer space, and that trip to heaven was going to be on the tail of a comet, and the price to get on that comet was $5.75. So when I started to investigate that, and there's some debate about whether some of that was actually Mark Twain's writings or not. which I understand. It's always there's always debate about everything, and that's fine. But when I started to investigate, he was actually a riverboat captain on a Mississippi riverboat, and the Mississippi River had a big significance to Tiando. They felt like that divided the country into two halves, and one half was where they felt comfortable being close to their older members in communication, and that was the western side. And on the other side, whenever they would venture east of the Mississippi, they would feel like disconnected from their connection to their next level older members' spacecrafts. Anyway, so I found out that the top deck on a Mississippi riverboat was actually called a Texas. I think it was spelled like Tejas, like Tejas or something. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it,
right,
but it actually refers to the captain's quarters. That's how you say it in
Spanish, Tejas.
Yeah, so it was actually it was the captain's quarters on the Mississippi riverboat. That deck was where the captain lived and operated the Mississippi riverboat. So I was putting this together with Tiando being from Texas, and that Doe was considered to be like an archangel, Michael. And an archangel is a captain of angels. And Doe considered himself to be a captain, and he considered T to be his admiral in the hierarchy of the next level that were doing this task on Earth. And so then the Mississippi riverboat then was America. And the captain's quarters was the West and Texas in particular, because that's where they awakened. That's where they got their first recognition that they had come from outer space and that they were here to fulfill prophecy and to the parts of the Bible, and which is what my task ended up being part of with my book.
Sounds like we all need to keep a good 575 in our pocket to make these connections.
Yeah. Now, the little thing on that also, that why would they have money in their pockets when they were taking a barbiturate to put their vehicles to death, right? But why would they pack a bag, and why would they have passports and identification? Of course, they wanted the authorities to know the legal names of everybody, so that would be one reason for that. But why pack a bag with a change of clothing in it and have money? But it was they said that they preferred not to leave that way. They preferred to be picked up by a spacecraft with their physical body, with their human body that they had. But they were perfectly willing to go through with leaving the way that it was designed, according to the way Doe and Tia actually simulated some of that years before that. But anyway, so because they didn't know, because it's the way of a member of the next level when they're on an undercover task like on the Earth, to provide options to their older member, to the admiral. So the captain wants to make sure that they don't do anything that would take away options for how to continue the project. And so if T, for instance, the admiral, wanted to pick them up with their physical bodies and then take those bodies and give them a task to do in Australia or something, or even on another planet where there were human equivalent life forms growing, they wanted to make sure that they provided that option. And so they wanted to have a little bit of money in order to, do something, in wherever environment they might be put in, and have a change of clothes so that they would look normal, instead of having those black Nikes and all dressed the same. So anyway, that's my take on that, and I don't say that just off the cuff. I say it with a lot of backup understanding that I got from Tina Doe over the years.
No doubt, Sawyer, no doubt. And I can tell you, I'll keep a $5.75 in my pocket, but I'm not ready to go meet the next level because I got a lot of ufology hearts to break in this world. But I thank you again for coming in, making those connections, for talking to me about the recent UFO news and how it all connects to the next level, alien conspiracies. And like I said, these connections that you made are amazing, and I appreciate them. I thank you for coming on. And hopefully we can get you on again in a few months and see where you're at. And maybe UFO News has gotten to its own next level where you can give us some more insight. How about that?
Thank you. That'd be great. It's my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to look up Sawyer on Facebook, on YouTube, and on his blog that he mentioned. We appreciate that he's here. And I thank everyone for listening. We'll be back on Friday with another interview. But in the meantime, we're still going to talk about UFO news because that's what we do. So, ciao.